Welcome to Now in Zen. Today we have Bryan Deister, microtonal composer. He also plays Lumatone on TikTok, does a bunch of jazz piano stuff, and has his own studio. Welcome, Bryan. We're so glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I noticed you've got a lot of guitars on the wall. Are any of those
Yeah.
microtonal?
The green one. Just like a Hadean, I think that's the name of it. I don't actually know the brand very well, but that is fretless. And then the little bass is also fretless. So, but other than that, I don't have any like fretted microtonal stuff.
Going fretless though, that's so smart. I was listening to your microtonal album, Leave You Behind. I noticed the guitar music in it, and was wondering if you had actually, played the guitar or used synthesizers, because it sounded pretty real to me. So I was wondering, did you use the fretless for that, or?
Yeah, there's some of the tunes it's a bit synthesized as well. But like Apprehension, that's that fretless. That you're hearing on there. And also in the corner there is electric cello. I don't know if that's very visible or not, but
Yeah,
so there's some of that on there too, which if you distort it, you can get kind of guitar type things. So some of those parts are actually that instead of guitar, but then some of them are just synthesizers that are ran through like synthesized amps and things like that.
It sounds like you have a pretty detailed setup. So were you just mostly close recording yourself for the album, like in your hands and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I recorded it all here. I have a little studio here, so like all the drums, I have a little room for recording drums and stuff. But I didn't really have the luxury of like retuning my piano or something and doing nice like classical type recording. That'd be cool to do at some point.
For microtonal piano, or just having the piano in tune?
Well, that's the other problem is it's going to be microtonal if you don't tune it anyway, to some degree, a little bit. But but it would be fun to do like to retune it and then make recordings and do that kind of thing and get a nice acoustic sound. No, I'm not terribly good at that, so.
It seems to be pretty rare for people to actually retune pianos themselves. Definitely a bit trickier than the other instruments. I'm also very curious about your microtonal tuning systems that you're using on that album. When I was listening to it, I was so struck by how your voice reminds me so much of Ben Spies from the Mercury Tree. A little bit. I don't know if you've heard any of his work.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very good. I really like your vocal performance, especially on Go Away.
Go away, don't see what I've done to look at. Drink the wine and sing, hold on, call me
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a cool tune. Yeah. Got a nice, I try to do that with the contrast, right? You have the very soft singing and then the more aggressive. Yeah, big dynamic stuff. Yeah.
There were a few times where I noticed microtones melodically, but usually I was, like when I was listening to it, I was hearing kind of like intervallic spots that seemed microtonal, but that weren't like melodic microtones. I didn't know if you were doing that too much. I think I noticed it in like Gasoline. There was like in the intro part, there's in the bass, like there's a little move where one of the notes goes down a microtone, maybe.
Yeah. That one is 5 equal divisions of the major third, the 5/4.
Oh, I love
So
that.
it was a funny when I recorded that one because I think the bass line sounds pretty, it's without the little microtonal thing there, it sounds pretty normal, I would
Right,
say.
yeah.
And then it's kind of like power chords for the chorus. It's kind of like a just simple rock song, but the melody is in a different key, basically. It's
Yeah.
like maybe 20 cents off or something like that.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
so when I kept recording it, I was like, I kept singing it in tune with the bass, and it was just I was like, I gotta sing it out of tune with the bass. So it took me a while to actually get a decent recording of the singing part. Because there's no like octaves, right? You don't really have a nice octave to sing.
Here's an example. There's the note we want, and in octaves it's I need. Out of tune is I need.
But yeah, I try to keep everything pretty subtle though. Like I that was kind of my goal with that album is like to put a bunch of like Zen harmonic silliness in there, but without it being too noticeable, without it being like here's the weird microtonal thing, but just like music, that's semi hopefully listenable.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Yeah. You know what it kind of reminds me of is like because I played jazz piano for a long time. It's kind of what I went to school for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I'm originally like more of a blues and rock guy. So every once in a while, you could do this with like playing like blues licks in a jazz solo. You just it can be kind of jarring if you do it a little too much, or
Right.
just even playing like a triad. If you're just playing all these big chords and then you just have a C major triad, it's like something sounds wrong because of the context. So I think it's like if you keep all the weird Zen harmonic stuff the whole time, then it's like you don't really notice it as much. But if you went back from like 12 to it, then it's like, oh, okay, this is quite different.
Context switching. If you engaged in context switching, you would notice more what's going on in a way that might, I don't know, I guess negatively impact the listening experience.
Yeah, I think that's the more hard way to do it is to go back and forth because um yeah, because then it's just that one little thing sounds weird and it sticks out. But if everything just sounds weird or like wrong or whatever, then you can kind of get away with it easier.
You mentioned the blues and rock influence as well, and I want to say there's a little bit of rock influence coming through on in your hands, and then a lot of things I want to say are influenced by almost like electronica or like chiptune, maybe in a way. Like if you
Hmm.
had to describe it as a particular style or set of styles, what would you say?
That is actually quite hard for me. But like my favorite rock band is Radiohead. And that's what I
Oh,
grew up listening to. So it's like they started off like their first album, Pablo Honey, right? Is like very like standard rock kind of stuff. And
yeah.
then you go to like Kid A and it's like this is weird electronic things. So sometimes I just don't have any particularly hard limits on like style. So sometimes I'll just throw in like electric cello also doesn't really belong anywhere probably in any normal. I don't know, maybe there are some genres I just don't know of that are like very electric cello based. That'd be cool, but there's a lot of things that it's just like I'm just have no idea what I'm really doing until the end. It's just and then it's like, oh yeah, okay, there's synthesizers here, there's acoustic stuff, but a lot of the things that sound electronic might also be acoustic instruments. Somebody gave me a psaltery, I think that's what it's called. And so I used that for the uneven halves, the second tune for the intro.
That's where you get that sound.
Yeah. So what I did is I recorded it and then I went back and mapped it with like sine waves, if that makes sense. Because I basically just totally destroyed my sultry almost. I just retuned it. And then I went back and figured out what the tuning was. And yeah. And it's also weird because I tried to like connect the tracks, but they're not actually connectable because I wrote them at different time periods. So like the ending of the previous track is just I can't remember exactly. I think it's like 38 cents sharp. Also, it's just completely different intervals and everything. So I had to like slide it down slowly. But yeah, so there's a sultry in there, but you would never be able to pick it out as that, I would imagine.
In the first part of that uneven halves, you have like kind of it sounds like a harmonic seventh chord to me with a neutral sixth of some kind over it, but I couldn't tell like if it was a particular like JI orientation or what sort of tuning you had going on.
Yeah, that's a weird tuning. It is like your seven harmonic, right? And then
Yeah.
the just intonation seventh chord, and then the 13th harmonic, um,
Hmm.
which is kind of like a six. Yeah,
So
that's
it was the
probably what you're
13th
thinking.
harmonic. Okay.
Yeah. And then the other ones I built off of the um seventh harmonic, another just intonated seventh harmonic chord. You get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, that's a classic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Did you use the seventh of the seventh as well as the 13 over 8 from the original root? Or did you compare those in any way?
I don't think I did, but they are fairly close, right?
So 49 over 32 is 737.65 cents approximately. And so we can also search the 13th harmonic on the Zen Harmonic Wiki. If you ever want to search something on the Zen Harmonic Wiki, you just type it in at the top like this. It used to be you had to use an underscore to search JI intervals, but a short period of time passed, a while ago, and now that's not true, and you can search things using the slashes, and you should get the page.
Hmm.
13 over 8 is 840 cents, so they're really far away from each other. Oh, I guess they'd be pointing in opposite directions from a sixth, right? So, like, if a normal, like, 12th tone minor sixth, would be 800 cents, then, like, a 13 over 8 points up, like, 40 cents, and then 49 over 32 points down the opposite way. So they actually would be about almost a semitone apart, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. Like the when I think about the 13th harmonic, I kind of think of it as a flat six, usually, I think. But
Right.
I guess it is kind of far away from something that's very, very flat,
Yeah.
But I guess it's sort of like um probably context, right? Depending on how you use it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um like I did one of my TikToks I did of the Lavender Town theme, from
Yeah.
the original one from first generation of Pokemon. I did it in 13 EDO, and
That's so great.
yeah, and I figured I could make it work because it's weird enough. It's supposed to sound kind of spooky, but I couldn't decide what interval I was playing. I was trying to find something that sounded like a fifth, and there's not really a good fifth there. So I ended up using the minor six as a fifth, if that
Oh,
makes sense.
yes,
Because
it
I just
does.
yeah. So yeah, and I think it kind of works. Because you're expecting to hear a fifth, and so it's like it's close enough to a fifth. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I really love how that one sounds. These are the kinds of decisions I think microtonalists face if they're using a really Zen harmonic tuning system. If they're using something that can kind of be mapped onto 12 pretty easily, then they don't have to make as many of those decisions, or if it's diatonic enough, almost none. Um,
Mhm.
but if you use a tuning where the intervals just don't line up with 12 almost at all, you have to make these crazy decisions about what counts as what sort of other thing. So I'd love to sort of get into the process of how your TikToks work, because Bryan works with like every layout under the sun, in a way that people dream and imagine and pretend like they will do, but then Bryan actually does it, and it's really cool. So yeah, no, He plays in like 32, 33, 31, 10, 13. I always see like whenever I see a layout that's just really crazy on the Lumatone and I go, what is that? It's always Bryan.
Yeah. Well, recently I've been doing uh just going up from 31 because I done like so many requests that I get, it's kind of hard to do those convincingly in the more radical and weird tunings. I think you could do them, but I got a feeling like especially on TikTok, the people are not really gonna um most of the people are gonna be they're gonna take a while to come around to it.
Right.
Um so recently I've been doing 32 and then I'm just going up every day and we'll see how far I get on that.
As of the time of editing this episode, Bryan has made it all the way up to 43. So here's a little montage. 32. 33. 34. 35. 36. 37. 38. 39. 40. 41. 42. And 43.
That's why you've been doing that. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
saw that you were doing 32, and I was like, wow, 32 is so rare, because it gets overshadowed by 31. There's like 5 or 6 people, including yourself, that have written things in 32.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. The tune I wrote, this was on my second album, the Dying Saviors, that name of that album. But anyway, the tune I wrote called In the Dark, I did something similar to this where I started with instead of a 24, which gets a lot of press or whatever, but I did a 23. And then 22 EDO, then 21, then 20, then 19, then 18, right?
Yeah.
And so that song has all of those one after another. And so I kind of like this idea of like going through them and sort of exploring each one, and because I think each one has its own merit, I don't think 31 is better than 30 or 32. I just think that it's better to emulate 12.
Yeah.
Uh, or it's also might be better for certain harmonic things, but I'm also not super interested in like getting the intervals to be harmonically laid out exactly versus just making something that's kind of different.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a microtonal entry point for a lot of people is, oh, we can tune chords really well. I mean, once you get over that, there's just like other stuff. So, what you're saying is very much the feeling I get as well. Yeah, you don't have tunings that are really better or worse than others subjectively. I guess the way I see it as well is that tunings give you more or less tools to work with. So, in my mind, the worst tuning is 0 EDO, because then you have no tools to work with. Under that logic, the more notes you have, the better the tuning is. But that doesn't really work because then if you have more notes, things can be unwieldy depending on how you're thinking of the situation. It's really interesting how the usefulness of a tuning like depends so much on the tools you have, and it's not
Hmm.
merely a theoretical exercise as many people would have you believe. I don't think.
I would agree though that in general, the more notes, it's probably going to be a bit easier. But I don't know. I like doing some of the smaller note ones,
Oh yeah.
on there's the last song on In Your Hands, which is the title track. I did similar to the In the Dark tune where I did 8, 9, 10, 11. And then of course you got to end with 24 because I'm not going to end with 12.
Wow.
But but yeah, that one was very hard though because it's like you don't have that many notes. And so you have to and a lot of times I would hear like melodies and I'd be like, "Oh, that's a cool melody." And then I'd be like, "Oh, I can't do that melody." If I want to be really strict about doing like 90 DO, I just don't have these notes here.
That's like an inverse 12 feeling. If you are in 12 and you try to think microtonally.
Once you get those ideas in your head, it's like then you kind of have a problem with a lot of the instruments you're playing too, because it's like where's these notes? Where are these things that you can hear but you can't actually play?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That was yeah. I mean, I do like 8 EDO a lot because it's kind of like it's like a double diminished scale. Well, I think it is a double diminished scale
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah. You
And
could
then
say
it's
that.
yeah, and then it's kind of like a whole tone scale, but a little bit bigger or smaller intervals, but a little more notes. It has the same kind of feeling as a whole tone scale. So it's like two of my favorite scales to play on a like the piano.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, very jazzy type scales too. So
Very underrated subset of 24 tone equal temperament. I wonder also how the Lumatone has affected your composition process. Did you which of your albums are microtonal and how? I know you have a new album coming out, Supernova.
yeah, that one. Well, okay, so all my albums that are released under my name have at least one microtonal track.
Yeah.
I didn't. I never completely barred it from any of my albums. So even the new one, there's 2 tracks that are 24 EDO. It's pretty simple, pretty vanilla kind of stuff. My first album just has one, which is a 19 EDO, but that one's it's not normal 19 EDO. It's like weird.
Oh, I
It's
love
enharmonic
that.
19 EDO. Um, and then I think I mentioned this my second album has the In the Dark with the that long chain of 23, 22. There's also a track that's 16 EDO. And then the next album um has one in a Pythagorean tuning, and just a 12 note Pythagorean tuning, and then one in 17 EDO. So I'm trying to make sure I hit all the numbers at some point. So we're gonna get
Oh yeah.
8. I had to include a 17 in there, just to make sure we're not missing any numbers. But yeah, the last album I put out before Supernova, In Your Hands, that's the only one that's all microtonal. Um, which I wanted to do for a long time to just make a completely microtonal record, but yeah, usually I would just have a few tracks that were microtonal, you know.
There's a name for the trope of trying to exhaustively go through lots of different tunings in sort of the manner of an etude where like you want to hit everyone in order to
Mhm.
explore them. That's actually called a survey. I don't know if you're familiar with some of these, but I think probably some of the most notable surveys have been with equal temperaments. Easley Blackwood's Microtonal Etudes is one. City of the Asleep's Map of an Internal Landscape. That's a really good album. City of the Sleep goes by many different pseudonyms online, including Cryptic Ruse for metal. And then Brian McLaren's microtonal music also comes to mind, but that's not really available on the internet. But he went through a lot of those same tunings, like in the 30s, that people tend to not hit
Yeah.
because 31 is so harmonic and 41 is so harmonic. So then there's all these equal temperaments in between that routinely get left out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be I think that would be fun to do to climb up from 24 and do 25 all the way up to some I don't know. It does get a bit much at some point when you start having like because I don't know if you would actually want to use like all of the notes in the tuning. If you have 50 notes in your tuning, are you going to actually use all 50?
Yeah,
You know?
that's a great question, and I think it's one that's been discussed on this podcast a few times as well, which is at sort of what percentage of the tuning needs to get used in order for it to kind of like count as being in the tuning. Like, I guess with 12 tone equal temperament, you don't have this problem because if you're using 7 out of 12 notes for basic diatonicism, that's like most of the tuning. But then you get into these other territories, and like, if you were to only use a 7 note scale out of a huge tuning, it doesn't really seem like you can. I mean, you can call it that equal temperament, but it doesn't convey like how chromatic things can get. So I think some microtonalists almost feel a pressure to use more notes just because of that
Yeah.
label. Some people, like, I prefer objectivity in my labels as much as I can, even though sometimes it's difficult to disentangle tuning labels from usage. And so I just prefer to call it by the equal temperament, regardless of whether I use a lot of notes or a few notes.
Yeah, well, it's funny because like the Microtonal album that I did, I actually used this instrument over here. It's called I think the instrument's called a whole tone revolution, but then the company that makes it is Chromatone,
Hmm.
which probably sounds like Lumatone. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not,
I'm
but
not actually.
um yeah, it's well, so the I think the original idea behind the instrument was the Janko style piano layout. Familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so that's what it basically is. And then I thought, this would be really great to do microtonal stuff because it's mostly isomorphic, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then when I was going to, I basically just was on the internet constantly searching a different layout keyboard like every day for years, trying to find things that I could acquire to make it a bit easier. Because I used to do the thing where I'd play piano, like keyboard, and like lay it out in like 19 and like try to figure out what's going on, and it's just so bad for the mind. But yeah, anyway, for the 30th anniversary, they had it for free, so I just bought one. I bought one for free, if that makes sense.
It
Um,
doesn't, but I'm
yeah.
intrigued.
Yeah. Well, I just kept searching every day, and then it was like, yeah, it's the 30th anniversary. We got them, so just pay for shipping from Japan. And yeah, I'm in the US, so it's like $300. So I was like, hell yeah, let's do that.
So you got a Janko keyboard, and you were able to make it do microtones.
Yeah, so yeah, I just laid it out like in my DAW or whatever, so that you'd have like 19 notes laid out on like the MIDI roll or whatever, and then I just tried to figure out how to play stuff like that.
That's really fascinating. So it was almost like kind of like a proto Lumatone. Like you got this before you got the Lumatone, and then when you saw the
Yes.
Lumatone, you were like, "This is it."
Well, funny thing, I actually think I saw the Lumatone around the same time, and I remember looking at the price for the two instruments, and there being like this one, the Japanese one is like 3,000, and it's like 30,000 yen or whatever, something like that. Lumatone's like 4,000. And I was like, uh, I don't really want to spend that much money. So, but then after about like 5 years, I was like, all right, let's just buy a Lumatone at this point. It's like like basically the beautiful thing with the Lumatone is that you can set it up. It doesn't have to be like a Janko layout. It could be any layout. And then you can also color things, which is a thing I really wanted on the chromatone, which is ironic since it's chroma. So you'd think there'd be some color, but it's just completely blank. And yeah, so it helps you like, oh, here's where an octave is. If I at least knew where like an octaves were, then I could at least like know kind of where to like put my hands. But that's what I did for a long time. That's how I wrote the album In Your Hands, was just on a chromatone with no sense of where octaves were. It was very difficult. But yeah, Lumatones made things a lot easier. And you can also do things like depending on how you set up the layout, it can really affect how you even go about playing the instrument.
Yes, yes. This is really a big thing, I think. I was trying to play a Here Between the Lines song in 31. Like there's a progression in the bass where you have two notes a normal a diatonic semitone away, and then they
Mm.
both go down one diesis. So like A half sharp and G sesquisharp together go down to A and G sharp. And so like on the other 31 layout where those are next to each other, you would just move down a little bit. But on Bose and K, it's like a huge jump to just go down one. And so the music itself can affect the kind of layout that you play. Again, things that we have no concept of in 12 because we never even have to explore those issues.
Yeah, well, yeah, that whole thing of like, especially like the default 31 layout is like on the Lumatone, if you want to do those little changes, you have to
Yeah,
move all across the keyboard, and it's like very unintuitive, I would say,
right. I think that's
like
the Bose and K. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's those types of layouts that are all that are trying to make things convenient to play your basic intervals, to play chords even, because a lot of times you can lay it out like straight or whatever. The way I think of it is kind of like a guitar, like
Yeah.
each column is a string, and if you go up and down the string, and then each each string is a different amount apart,
Yes.
and you could make it whatever amount you want. Those are the basic four that I have when I make, or sorry, three that I have. It's two, three, and then four um
Yeah.
steps between. My first track that I ever made was the track called Come, which is 19 EDO, that weird 19 EDO one. But I showed it to a friend of mine who has perfect pitch, and he like got a headache. He was like in physical
Wow.
pain. He was like, "This is terrible." I've never really thought about perfect pitch, but at that time I was like, I think I'm glad I don't have it like uh he does, because I like the microtonal stuff, and I would hate to like, because he was actually physically like quite ill.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Um
I don't understand the perfect pitch people who think this stuff is like so bad because for me it makes it like extra addictive, like it hits harder. Another question I wanted to ask you is if you've ever done any notating.
no, but I was thinking like that tune would be maybe a good one to try, because it's fairly simple, pretty simple.
Yeah.
Nothing too wild.
By the way, the two first chords of this song feature two tetrads. The first one is a super major third, a flat 5, and a flat 7. And then in the second chord, the flat 5 moves up a diatonic semitone so that it's a subminor sixth away from the root instead. Yeah.
But yeah, when I compose, I don't really think about like the theoretical stuff, especially not that one, because that was like,
Yeah.
what I literally did is I took my keyboard and laid it out in 19, which
Yeah.
is like a 12th becomes an octave.
Right. That's
Um,
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I barely knew what I was doing looking at the keyboard, because it didn't make any sense, on the on the keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, but it's not that complicated.
Right.
It's very simple. And hopefully, I mean, that's the thing too, is like you could write those weird chords, but if the melody has a certain flow to it that it sounds like if it sounds like a melody,
Yeah.
I think you can get away with a lot of shenanigans.
It reminds me of Superstar Saga's Sun's Rise, which is like some microtonal stuff on YouTube. You're just staying on one root and one essential quality of chord, but then you're changing one note or two notes so that it's shifting between two qualities that are supposed to count as the same in 12th tet, but aren't the same in 19th tet. He's shifting between a major seventh and a super major seventh.
So that would be the third moving. Is that right?
Yes, the third
Okay.
moves up, and then the seventh also moves up.
Okay. Interesting.
It used to be when I was in college and stuff. Like, if I ever had to notate anything microtonal, I didn't know. Like, it's so hard to just get notation to do all of the things that normally happen in a system where like playback is built in and you have the accidentals and they mean the right things and they engrave correctly and they behave right and all of that stuff. And so I was trying to do that in Finale in college and only figured out how to do like 2 out of 4 things you're supposed to hack the program to do in order to get it to just do normal microtonal notation. Notating in Dorico is like literally as easy as notating in 12 tone equal temperament. Do you do music in just intonation a lot? Equal temperaments, unequal temperaments? What's kind of like your ratio? I'm noticing a lot of equal temperaments from you, some unusual ones that you've mentioned, and then you mentioned just intonation a little bit ago as well, and in your hands. So I'd be curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Well, like specifically on that, um, it's mostly like I don't know if I guess it is equal temperament. I'm not sure what the right terminology is, but it's not of octaves. Mostly on that album, it's like equal divisions of other intervals.
You can call all of those equal divisions, and then since people usually say equal temperament for octaves, I guess if you said equal divisions, people would be like, equal divisions of what? Technically, you can still call them equal temperaments.
Yeah, and then the other thing, yeah, I don't particularly like harmonic intervals too much. Like, um, I I kind of find that you know what I think it is? It's because when you're doing a counterpoint, right?
Right.
And you have things moving, the thing that you always want to avoid is that the notes sound like chords. Like you don't want to have it be vertical. You want it to be
Right.
horizontal, that this note is moving. And if everything lines up harmonically, it's like the kind of the exact opposite of how a counterpoint would work, right? Counterpoint has to be that this note goes here because it's moving there in a well, I think technically speaking it's like a Pythagorean way, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's moving relative to fifths mostly. That's kind of what's going on. And then if it moves harmonically, you lose that. And then you just have a bunch of static chords that all line up with the bass, which is kind of what would defeat the purpose of counterpoint, I think,
Yes.
because you don't hear those individual lines. So I think for me, like the harmonic stuff isn't as interesting as the counterpoint because
Right.
I'm very much into that. I wrote a set of preludes and fugues, 24, for left hand alone piano. Speaking of using Finale to try to get it to do things that it won't do, that was a nightmare for me to try to get. Because usually a lot of the times in one staff would have 4 parts, and so
Right.
it's uh, just a complete mess.
Right. Truly.
But but yeah, so I think for me, yeah, the harmonic intervals are just not my favorite to use. Not that there's anything particularly that's kind of my view in general is that all the ratios are fine in theory. It's
Yeah.
just can you make it work, you know? And
Yeah.
that's kind and I'd rather make something that sounds bad work, like
Right.
that's naturally has some grit and funk to it, than the other way, because that just seems less exciting to me, you
Yeah.
know?
100%. Yeah. What I feel as well. Another Zen harmonic survey I forgot to mention that's very important that came out
Hmm.
recently that has been years in the making is Aaron Andrew Hunt's equal tempered keyboard. And I was reminded of that not only because it might be the only like contrapuntal microtonal survey that
Mm,
exclusively features piano music, but also because Aaron himself made this same observation when we briefly talked to each other in Indiana that notes that don't approximate or diets that don't approximate a ratio are better for independence because they don't sound like they're part of the same timbre. So how does another thing I wanted to ask you, of course, about the Lumatone is
yeah.
as someone who is interested in doing more of what you do, is how do you come up with layouts and how do you use the software to generate those layouts? Because I've just been using the presets, and I'm sure there's lots of
Yeah.
people who would love to know how you like come up with a 33 tone layout and then like put it on your Lumatone.
So basically the way I think about it is you can do the guitar string type things. And the other ones are kind of the other type of layout that I think of is basically the same idea, but instead of it being keys that are orthogonal, is that I think that's the right term.
Sounds right.
It would be keys that are like separated by two keys between them, if that makes any sense. So like if you have a set of four keys in a diamond,
Yeah.
those two, you would scratch those two off, and you would say that the top one and the bottom one, those are the connected ones.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that 33 one, the two connected ones there are from top to bottom, 0 to 4, right?
Uh
And
huh.
then you would try to lay it out from there, each one having a scale that would lay out to. So
Ah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of different ideas, but basically, that one is one of the things where you basically write a bunch of major scales, or you write a bunch of pentatonic scales, like the major minor pentatonics, you know.
Yes.
And then it's like you have white keys and black keys, but you might have just like four or five sets. Or I think the 33 one has I guess I could count it.
Because
Um
I want to. So 32 is like really, really sharp and has like whole steps of 30 seconds of an octave and half steps of one. And so 33, I guess, would be like, I don't know, something like 5 and 4. 5 times 5 is 25. And then 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 8. Yes. Yes.
yeah.
So 33 tone equal temperament. If you look at its diatonic scale, its whole steps are 5/33 of an octave, and its half steps are 4/33 of an octave. So we call that very soft, actually. I don't know if you've heard about softness and hardness.
No.
Softness and hardness time. Like, if you have whole and half steps in a scale, there might be some flexibility of the sizes where, like, the half step is a little bit smaller and the whole step's a little bit larger. 12 tone equal temperament just has, like, a 2-to-1 ratio. So if the half steps get really, really small and the whole step gets really large, we call that, like, a hard scale. If the steps are coming more close to the same size instead, then we call it a very soft scale. So 32 is, like, really, really hard, and 33 is, like, really, really soft.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about like 17 EDO, that would be soft, right?
No, that's a hard one.
That's a
But it's
hard one.
but it's not nearly as hard as 32.
Okay. Interesting. Because the word soft makes me think of this. I'm thinking of the sound of a whole step and then a half step, right? That minor third, like that makes me think soft. It has a very soft quality in my mind. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm just associating that a bit weirdly. Like the thirds in that scale make me think soft
Yeah.
because they're not, because if they were more in tune, they would be harder, if you get what I'm
Ah,
saying.
yeah.
Like
And
more to the harmonic series, if they would be like harsh and aggressive. Like if you want a big
yeah.
chord, you definitely want it to be more in tune. It's going to be louder, more in your face. And then softer would be if it's slightly sharper or flatter. Yeah.
Great example of how the language can be confusing surrounding these things because there's not that many names for things that don't just have completely other connotations.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's
Well, it
really
also made me think of I'm trying to remember exactly, but I think in the Renaissance, the term soft was used for like things that are going flat out of key. You know what I'm talking about? And then
yes. Yes.
and so like a major chord would be considered hard because the third is related is basically like sharp, if that makes If you get what I'm like, if you put a chord out of the key major, it's going to be because you've raised the minor third, so you're making it more hard, which is weird because it's usually major chords are seen as like positive and minor
Right.
chords are seen as negative. So hard meaning I would say more in tune with the harmonic series is what I'm kind of thinking of, because it would be like minor chords are less in tune. The exact inversion, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. A lot of these terms are not very familiar to me because um I just sort of tried to do things on my own, and I haven't really come up with many like theories or ideas about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Just kind of
Well.
try things, I don't know. Back to the layout thing, because this is
Sure.
just very complicated. So basically, one thing that I was mentioning is like if you do sets of 7 and 5, those are
Yes.
pretty intuitive for
Right.
piano players, and so that's going to work pretty well. So like if you're doing 17, you would do a set of 7 and then 2 sets of 5,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so you could use that idea on a, but interestingly, I think I'm trying to remember. I think one of the presets on the Lumatone is 29, and
Yes.
I think it's 7 5 7 5 and then 7. Is that right? Does that add up correctly?
Maybe.
Or no, it's a 5. No, it's got to wait. Um,
Forgetting the thing.
yeah, it's let me think. 24 plus 5. Yeah, so it's got to be 7 5 7 5 5, right?
75755. You're talking about like the different rows of like black keys.
Yeah, I think technically the way it's laid out there is 7 5 5 7 5.
Let's see. 7. Yeah, it's got 2 rows of 7. 7,
Yeah,
5, 7, 5, 5. Yeah.
yeah, and I think, well, anyway. So funny thing, I did a live stream. I've been doing like some live streams playing microtonal stuff on TikTok and whatever, and I played some stuff in 29 before, and so I just was like, let me just go to the default one, which I never played, and I was just messing around with it. So the way I had it laid out when I did it was 4 rows of 7, and then that's just a random single note that's alone and sad. Uh, and that made perfect sense to me when I did it in 4 rows of 7. So I think it's kind of interesting. You could do, because it's
Yeah.
like 28, and then you just have an extra note chilling.
Right, yeah.
Um,
I'm trying to remember 29's diatonic scale. I'm pretty sure it's hard. 5/29ths of an octave in a whole step and 2/29ths of an octave in a half step. So it is hard.
okay, yeah.
Um, and
That's
every
just
one of
that's
them.
just funny to me though, because when I hear hard, I just think it's more in tune.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's the same perception. But yeah, I'll have to take a note of that and uh think about that idea more.
Can you screen share the app that you're using for layout generation? Is it like Svord or whatever his name is, that thing, or
I've just been using the Lumatone editor.
oh, so you
So
can just do it all in house in the editor. Do you meticulously come up with your own layout every time?
yeah,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
yeah. Like what's funny too is there's a 17 EDO layout that I saw, which a lot of the layouts that have the 3 and 4 group for 7, right? And
Yes.
that looks very logical, and it makes sense for piano because you tuck your thumb under in the same way you would play like a C major scale.
Right.
So when I first laid out the 17, I did it in uh yeah, 3 notes. So going up the column, it's 3 notes, which means that it does the 3 4, but then the next one is up,
Yeah.
and so the whole thing is going diagonally across the keyboard.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was thinking around, I was like, oh, you could just adjust the second one and then just have it be lower, and then it would be like 100 times more simple.
Huh.
Um, but
Would it make it non-regular if you did that?
no, I think it would be fine, and it would also make something that's kind of more intuitive if you're playing the other layouts, which is that going up means going to a sharp and going
Yeah,
down means going to a flat.
that is
That makes a
interesting.
lot of sense. My layout that I had, it kind of depends, but sometimes when you're going to a sharp, you have to go down, which is a bit unintuitive. But for some reason, I just never bothered to create another 17 layout that actually made sense. I just kept using this very terrible layout that I made. But I probably should at some point because I just very like it just takes a long time, honestly, to do the layouts by hand and put it in each. But that's what I do. I just go each number one at a time. And usually
I do that for numbering.
what makes it a bit easier is to set up a bunch of base layouts and then go in and color things afterwards, you know? So then it's like you you could do like for example the 17 one I'm talking about and the 19 EDO layout that's the default would be the same. It would just have different coloring.
Hmm,
So the
strange. Yeah.
if you get what I mean, like the numbers assigned to each pitch are the same, or each key are the same, but the coloring is different.
Have you ever sent layouts to other people?
You know, I somebody on my YouTube was asking me about. They were like, "What is this layout?" I think it was the one I did. I did a Bowen Pierce piece. I did a little improvisation and I posted on TikTok, and then people were like, "You need to do a full thing," and so I did a whole like I don't really know what to call it. It's kind of like a waltz, but anyway,
Huh.
somebody asked me like, what is the layout I'm using?" And I used the same layout I used for 13 EDO. So I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna take all of them and put them in a Google Drive, and I just sent a link and said, you know, here's all of them. And then the one that I use for this is called 13 EDO because I didn't bother to make a different one for Bowen Pierce, but it really should probably have some sort of different layout because especially since I know that there's like a lot of theory behind that uh tuning system, you know. So it would probably make sense if you're going to make that layout to like line it up with some of the theory and, you know, the thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um but I am quite lazy, so I just used the 13. I knew I had a layout with 13, so let's just use this one again, you know.
I think it's very in the spirit of Bull and Pierce as well, because lots of Bull and Pierce advocates want you to think of the tritave as equivalent, so then you've got that laid out on the
Mhm.
keyboard and it's right there. In fact, I think that may be how Elaine Walker used it also.
Yeah, well, like another example of that kind of thing that I noticed because a long time ago when I was working on these microtonal scales, I came up with a scale that's like 9 equal divisions of a perfect fifth.
Mm.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, you know, I came up with a scale. It's like, you know, I've worked out on the math. I was like, this is a good scale. And when I listened to Beauty and the Beast, Wendy Carlos, right? Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, this is this is
Great
not
piece.
very original of me, you know, because that's like it's not exactly um 3/2, right? The division, like the big thing that you're dividing, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think all of those are pretty um like you're not going to get them exact because maybe you want to like push the thirds or maybe you want to push the seventh or whatever it is, right? Maybe you have some reason. But always when you don't have an octave, there's not really a strong reason that you need to have it be exact because at no point are you hitting the same octave in like 7 places or something. You never hit like if you hit all the fifths in 7 places, if they're like 1 cent off, it's not really going to be a problem. But
Right.
it
Yeah.
might be a problem if it's a few cents off and you go up a few octaves and then the top part of your instrument is, you know, like actually quite off, you know.
The error accumulating sort of thing.
Yeah. But what I was gonna say about the layout for it's the Carlos Alpha and the Carlos Beta scale is what I was thinking of. So
Yes.
the alpha scale is 9. So I have a 9 EDO layout, which I've used for that. But then you could also use 19 and then
Ah,
just be aware that those are not octaves exactly, you know?
that's a great example of having two really valid layout ideas based on a theoretical principle and then sort of a pragmatic principle. I personally would want to do the 19-tone one, but then just know that the octave isn't there, because I've done that in the past with other layouts and it's worked pretty well for me in terms of thinking.
Yeah. Well, I did a cover on my TikTok in that, and I used the 19. And my thinking was like it's supposed to be like some sort of a creepy sounding thing. So I figured if it's out of tune, it's gonna sound great, so it's not a
Yeah.
big deal that I'm playing octaves that are out of tune. But if I was trying to do something more in the spirit of the idea of nine divisions of the perfect fifth, then I wouldn't do that, because then it's like you shouldn't really be playing octaves. You should be trying to avoid that and avoid thinking of it. So yeah, depending on the layout, it's going to really change how you go about playing it, because it's going to feel nothing like what you're originally playing. Like if you're doing nine versus even though interestingly though the just like 17 and 19, the keys are laid out the same for those two, the 9 and the 19. That's kind of like my whole TikTok idea. Well, honestly, there's the reason I mainly started doing that was because I was like, um, I don't know how to play this instrument. So I was posting piano stuff, and I've been playing piano for 20 years, so I can play decently well, I would say. And so I was like, well, okay, let's switch it up. Let's play this instrument I have no business posting videos of and don't know how to play. And it'll just totally switch up the vibe. Before I'm like trying to like shred and like look at all this impressive stuff. I'm like, okay, can I play a major chord? Let's see if I
Right.
could do anything. You know. So that was my original impetus, was just to practice and give an excuse for me. Like, I'm gonna record a video every day, so therefore I will practice this instrument. And then people were asking me to do all these other things and requests and stuff. And then I figured, what if I can like slip in a bunch of microtonal things and then slowly get people to come over, Because I get a lot of comments that will say things like I used to think microtonal music was just a complete waste of time and terrible. Right. And I was like, that's a weird thing for me to think, because I never really felt that way. I felt it was different,
Same. Yeah.
and I felt like I might not have like understood what was going on or what the thing was. But it might have also helped because like I listened to a lot of Persian classical music when I was in college.
Yeah.
I like when I come home, after playing a bunch of jazz tunes and Duke Ellington, I just put on the Persian classical music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then and so then you just get used to those things. And I think it would be ridiculous to say like, oh, like this, the fact that you're tuning a centaur like this way is silly. You should tune it 12 tone.
Right.
Like that, no one would say that, because they'd be like, this is a whole tradition behind it. This isn't just something people came up with willy-nilly.
Very selective with how they say that, aren't they?
Yeah, so I think if you listen to traditional music that's microtonal, I think people would come away a bit more receptive to it, and because really there's not really that much different between like 5 EDO and certain gamelan stuff, right?
Yeah.
The,
Slinger scales. Yeah.
yeah, the ideas are not like completely whole cloth new, you know. And so I
Right.
think just taking that sort of approach. But I've noticed a lot of the comments I get are like very negative towards microtonal stuff, and then they're like, "Oh, but you've changed my mind. Now I got to go listen to this. Now I got to check it out more."
That is amazing. You're doing God's will.
Yeah, I that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to slowly bring people over, and then I'll do the more really weird stuff as well, and you know, it usually gets a fairly positive reception. But I think if people hear the tunes they know well and they like, and they're like, "Oh, this works being out of tune. This sounds good," then they'll relax a bit.
Which
But
which videos covers songs are the most popular, and how does the request system work? Because I see requests for you all the time to do songs.
well, okay, I'll answer the in reverse order. The there's no system for requests. People just requesting stuff, and yeah, I don't know. That happened because I was posting a bunch of videos. Actually, the Bolin Pierce one did really well for some reason that I posted like a year ago. And so then somebody requested the same thing like on 8 of my videos. They just went through. I was like, well, I guess this person really wants to hear this. So I was like, okay, I will try, So I came up with something, and then that video did well, and then people requesting other things. So it just kind of happens
So
over
basically,
time.
you read the comments, and then if you see a lot of comments for one thing, you incorporate it. Do you write down like all requests you see? Kind
Oh,
of.
it's just so many requests. I just flooded. Yeah, I don't know. I will say that I don't do just the most popular ones. I also do ones that are like obscure that no one will know because I feel like uh I kind of want to keep it a bit balanced, and I don't just want to do the things that people are requesting of me to do
Yes.
completely based on mob rule or whatever.
Right.
So I will try to do some ones that are like, if I know the thing and I like the piece, then I'll do it. Um, like one of the most popular ones that I did, I think it is the most popular, is the Liquid Smooth one I did in 17 EDO. And that one was fun because it didn't really work in 17.
Oh.
Which is what I found out. I was like, oh, it's kind of a tricky situation because I'm trying to remember it offhand. I'm pretty sure. So it has a 5 of 5, right?
Yes.
Fully diminished 5 of 5 without the root. Let me just pick a key. So that
Yes. Picky key.
I'm having trouble thinking of how to explain it. So let's say we're in C minor, right?
Sure. Sure.
So it has a fully diminished seventh chord. Seven fully diminished 7 of 5,
Of five.
right? Well, because
Of
it's
D.
the F sharp wants to
Oh.
resolve to G. Well, the ironic thing is the chord I actually played was the A fully diminished 7. So it didn't have an F sharp, it had a G flat.
Oh,
That's
I
what
love
that's
that.
why I said it that way. And it had an A in the bass as well. So the A moves up to B, and then it's a G7 over B, first inversion, whatever.
Yeah.
And then it goes to C. So it's a pretty standard, 5 of 5 to 5 to 1. But in the melody, there's a G at the top. So playing F sharp and G just sounded quite wild. And I
So it
thought
was
it
too
was
crunchy.
interesting. Yeah, because on a piano, I played it and I was like, oh, it sounds fine. And it sounds even better when you have a good singer who's singing it and then the piano is playing it because there's more of a difference in the timbre, right? But yeah, I noticed that was very bad to my ears. So then I thought, well, let me flatten that F sharp. And then it's like, oh, okay, this sounds way better. This sounds way better. But theoretically, it's doesn't make sense to me. Um, and I actually, there's a correction I have to make. It wasn't a G7, it was just a normal G.
Oh.
If it was a G7, then arguably the G flat could go to F, and then the F would go to E flat or whatever. But it was just a plain old G chord, so that G flat should not really be going up to G, theoretically. But yeah, so it is funny that like that one, and then arguably 17 EDOs is pretty out in terms of the thirds.
Oh yeah.
But I thought it would be good because the melody, the tension note is actually the minor third on the chorus, not the D, which is actually where you sit the whole time.
I might even call it F half sharp. You could do that if you wanted to retain the spelling of the leading tone. But would you say that the difference between G flat and G or F half sharp and G, like that neutral second resolving, is less off-putting to the ear than an F sharp and a G clashing in the melody?
Yeah, I think the melody is the more important thing. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think if the melody works, then the chords have to do less to make sense of it. But I think it's also because in the melody, it goes from F to G, F natural to G natural. So it's like
Oh.
this weird note in the middle is also like it's hard to hear F sharp going to G and F going to G at the same time because they're just so different. And the way they resolve has a different feeling.
Yes. By the way, for our listeners, if you're in 17 tone equal temperament and you're going from F to G, the order of the notes are F, G flat, F sharp, and then G. So G flat is actually lower than F sharp. If you wanted to name it using half accidentals, you could say it goes F, F half sharp, F sharp, G. And then if you wanted to start from G and go down, you could say it goes G, G half flat, G flat, G. So like F half sharp is enharmonic to G flat, and G half flat is enharmonic to F sharp.
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit confusing. But that is, yeah, exactly. I was just the F sharp goes down to G flat. I don't know. It's all these different tunings are just such wild things, like theoretically.
Yes,
Uh,
there's so much color there. It's amazing. Is there one more theoretical example that you would want to share with us where intervals are changed in a certain way?
yeah, I'm trying to think. Most of the time, like specifically like with the cover stuff, like I don't try to stay straight too far off. But that was actually a time where I was like, I'm just gonna do exactly what it is in the song, and I was like, oh, it doesn't work, you know. I wasn't trying to do anything like Zen harmonic or funky. I was just trying to play exactly what it would be on 12, and it just didn't pan out.
Mhm.
So then I had to do something that sounded weird, or something that theoretically is weird that sounded normal. Just kind
I
of a
love
funny
that.
thing. But there's been a few times where I throw in things like with the 17 again, like doing the I know it's basically a cliche, but it's like you take a minor third and you divide it in half,
Yes.
and you build tetrachords and scales based on that.
Yes.
So if you're playing something that has some minor feelings and you throw in a little bit of ornamentation around that kind of thing, you can get away with slipping that in unbeknownst sometimes.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is just there's a lot of like um creative creative decisions you have to make if you're trying to convert things, right? That it's not so simple as like you're going here and you have to pick. I've seen that comment a lot. People say like the way do you convert it by just going to the closest note for every thing, and it's like yeah, if you try that, it's probably not gonna go well
Oh,
because like things in 12 just don't. It's not really gonna sound normal, I think, if you just go to the closest place, you know.
right.
And then what do you do about like the fact that things aren't actually that anharmonic notes are not anharmonic in other tuning systems, you know, where they do become different, and then you have to make strategic choices.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. There's lots of I can't really think of a good example at the moment, but there's lots of options where you might choose to have like the thirds be slightly out of tune or s- choose maybe the fifths to be slightly out of tune. I don't know.
Yeah. In covers a lot, I always try and like find some kind of Zen harmonic trick in the intervals or the relationships that like justifies the fact that I'm using a Zen harmonic tuning. Like I don't want to just put something 19 like in diatonic and like have nothing else happen. So like I don't know if you saw I did a True Love Waits cover recently with
Yeah,
Lumatone
that
playing.
was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't leave. Don't leave.
I deliberately changed the bass line because it's normally like A, C, G, and then like it moves to A flat, C, G. So you could do that in 31, no problem. It's just A to A flat, slightly narrower. But I purposely took the A and raised it to A half sharp, and took the A
Mm.
flat and lowered it to A half flat. So that does two things that are really helpful. The C and G stay the same actually. What it does is it makes that A half sharp construct sub minor with like a sub minor seventh as well. So you can incorporate all that language into saying it's like an A half sharp sub minor seventh. And then it makes the A sesquiflat super major. So like A half A sesquiflat C G C. Then uh So you not only have two different qualities, but also the distance between them in the bass has widened, so they're a neutral second away.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, so yeah, so the C and the G kind of acts as a third and seventh, right?
Yeah, in both of them, and they anchor the thing,
Yeah.
especially since it's already in like C already. I also changed that first C to C super major seventh because then the E half sharp and the B half sharp in there, they line up with A half sharp in an A half sharp sub minor seventh chord.
That's pretty wild. To be honest, for like my most of my covers, I try to do a little bit, but I do worry about how much I can realistically get away with, you know?
Yeah.
Because yeah, that's how I kind of see it in general with music is like the cool stuff, like the musicians will like it. They'll think it's cool.
Oh
But
yeah.
the general populace are probably going to find it to be a bit weird, and so they might not like it and whatnot. So yeah, you gotta have to decide how much you want to go down that route of making it weird or not making it weird. But yeah, unfortunately, most of my covers are pretty vanilla, I would say. I mostly just do, you know, like test in the water, baby step kind of thing into it. And then like what you're talking about is more like now we're getting real weird. The cover stuff is whatever. I'm not my heart's not really in it, honestly. So
You're thinking of maybe pivoting into kind of other stuff, but TikTok has like made you like it's given you this role that you feel you have to fulfill maybe.
well, it's I think it was good for me though to just learn the instrument and everything. Even if a lot of the stuff isn't too exciting, like intellectually interesting or whatever, at least it's like getting my fingers practicing these weird things, you know?
Absolutely.
Because
It's yeah.
yeah.
It's definitely valuable for sure, not only in what you're doing to bring people to the fold, but also your own instrumental technique and musical journey and things like that. So, if you had to estimate and say how many cover songs you've done with the Lumatone on TikTok, what would you say?
I could just look it up. I know it's like 340 or something, I think. It's 335 at the moment. So,
Wow.
yeah, and then I've done a few because most of these are pretty short, right? They're pretty like under a minute most of the time. Some of them are a bit longer,
Yeah.
but I've done a few longer things. I think I've done only two, but yeah, I think it's like yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a bit burnt out, honestly, because I've done over 300. It probably causes a bit of burnout. And most of the time, I write stuff. Like I'm composing all the time. So usually when I do covers, I'm like, how can I write something here, or how can I write a extra line, or I'm thinking that way versus just like, how do I vanilla cover this thing?
You want to kind of make it your own, and that's a very relatable feeling.
Yeah, because otherwise, it's just like you know, I guess an AI could do it at some point, they're going to get powerful enough to do these things probably.
The AI, yeah. Oh my. I wonder if you'd get any satisfaction of doing like what I do on YouTube, where like you play all the instruments, but they're all microtonal. And so you have a microtonal cover with like a lot more orchestrational choices than just the Lumatone. But maybe you wouldn't get any satisfaction out of that.
I've done a few where I played like my fretless bass and
Yeah, yeah.
some like percussion. I actually play a lot of percussion instruments. So
Hmm.
most of the time, if you're watching the videos and you hear the percussion, that's usually like I played it in and recorded it, by hand and stuff.
Yeah,
Because I'm really big into that, and also playing drums. I usually will record a lot of those. But I just honestly find like the video part of it to be completely uninteresting. I'm a very non-visual person, like in my daily life,
yeah.
and that's kind of probably why I got into music in the first place. So the visual part is just totally like uninteresting to me. So
That's quite a perspective to hear from you. I would have expected you to say exactly the opposite.
well, I would love to do like I was learning a bunch of Scriabin pieces, right? And
Yeah.
he had the synesthesia, right?
Yes, yes.
And so a lot of the symphonies and things, he was thinking like this color, and then it would have been awesome, to have the thing light up and like, there's all these colors going on. And you could do that with the Lumatone quite easily. You could make Like if you're doing that concerto idea, you could have like each section have a different color, or each, you could do all sorts of fun stuff. And then the way I do it with the video editing, where I'll like, you can go in after and like make it change colors slowly, or you can have like certain sections changing colors, and you could do all sorts of stuff.
This is, I think, the other question I had about the Lumatone that I was forgetting is how you change colors over time. Because I saw there was, I mean, I know how to get the colors from the Lumatone layout, but you're saying you can edit the color in a DAW where the color transforms over time. Is that how you do it, or?
No, I actually just do it with well, I use Final Cut, but you could use any, video editing software to do it.
You're not actually changing the color of the Lumatone itself. You're applying like some color filter in video software, and it's slowly fading in.
Yeah, that's why if you notice a lot of the videos, my hands are like completely dark silhouettes.
Yes.
It's because if I didn't do that, my hands would be like purple or change of color. Be very weird.
Oh,
Because
I see.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's I developed that over a while. Like I was making videos doing like all sorts of weird visual stuff. And then I was like, this works because that was the other problem I had. If I record in the day, it looks totally different than I record at night.
Right.
But I came up with a system to lower the exposure. I don't know much about video editing, but I just know how to do it. And it basically, like, everything other than the keyboard is completely black. And then when you change the color, it's not going to change the color of the dark spots because there just isn't any color there, you know?
Automation in color that you could edit over time. That would be super cool, and I think I can think of so many applications for that, similar to the
Yeah.
Scriabin one that you thought of. Um,
Yeah.
so it'd be
Yeah. No, I think it'd be great. And you could do concerts where depending on what the color of the instrument was, there'd be colored lights on stage, and you could have the whole thing like set up. But like I said, I'm not, visually speaking, I'm not really geared that way.
right.
Um, so I don't really ever think about it. Sometimes people ask me about like, why did you pick these colors? Sometimes I have a good reason. Like sometimes I'll try to make the colors represent like whatever thing it is.
Yeah.
Like if people ask for a certain like thing from a video game, I'll like look up the title screen and then try to make it match that. Or if it's a certain character that it's supposed to represent, I'll try to make it embody those colors.
Yeah.
Um, but I usually do that in post because if I did it like while I'm recording it, it might kind of hurt my brain a bit
Yeah.
because I'm like, yeah, this layout, the red is like your C's, and then this layout, the blue,
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice to keep it consistent because otherwise you'd be like, although it's funny because I did play a few things recently where I had it on the wrong layout, but
Oh.
I wasn't looking at the keyboard, so I didn't have any issue playing. Um,
Huh.
and then when I looked at the keyboard, then I got freaked out and I got totally messed up. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But as before, I was just playing and it was fine. But yeah, I think there's a lot of muscle memory that I've gotten now.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
if I played something with like no, like the layout was the same, but the all the colors were like the same, I could probably survive on some things.
Yeah.
I should probably do that at some point too. I've done a few covers where I actually have it. There's like the one cover for White Space, which I made completely white,
Ah.
because I thought that would kind of fit. And it literally was. It didn't do that in editing or anything. That was just the whole keyboard was white. But that was a pretty simple one.
It's like the next level of virtuosic Lumatone playing is just depriving yourself of the colors to help.
Well, it's funny because that's what I used to do is on the chromatone, which I do have still, sitting over there. But yeah,
Oh yeah. I have seen those
Uh,
before.
I
Yeah.
should say the chromatone is ironically not the name of the instrument. I think it's called Whole Tone Revolution, or there's like chromatone. So there's some like weird number code. I don't remember, but just to
Yeah.
be clear about that. But then again, I also don't speak Japanese, so a lot of it I also don't understand on that level. But you can't. There's no color
Right.
on it. Yeah, so it's just uh a 3-row Jenko layout that you got for that.
And so when you're pressing a key down, Like, I know that sometimes in a Janko layout, if you press a key...
No, it's one key. Yeah.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So yeah. Okay, yeah. Because it would be nice though if it was not one key.
Right.
And I had this delusion when I got that instrument, and also when I got the Lumatone, of like I'll be able to play repeated notes because I have different keys, you know.
Ah, yeah.
And then on the Lumatone and on that instrument, I just played on one key, and so now I'm just better at playing repeated notes because I just have this tiny little square to play, you know.
Right.
So that's
yeah.
instead of it being like super easy, it just became way harder, and then I just got better at playing repeated notes because that's just one of the like worst things to do on piano is repeated notes. But at least you got a key, like a whole thing,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, unfortunately, my the whole tone revolution or whatever doesn't have any ability to do separate keys. I think originally it was just built as like I think it's originally like a Korg synthesizer that they just put things on top of it or somehow or something.
Right. So it doesn't give you different MIDI data for each key either. If you press one of them or any of them, it's giving you the same MIDI note. Right.
Yeah, because it's just one key moving, right? And with the three little buttons on it.
Yeah.
But the other thing for me is like my fingers are kind of big, and those keys are just way too small, like
Gotcha,
to
yeah.
actually play. But for some reason, I did write a whole album on it, so I figured it out.
Yeah.
But it was just a thing that like nice to have the Lumatone, nice upgrade.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me about the Lumatone. I learned a lot of really cool stuff from this conversation. Thanks for listening to Now and Zen. Go ahead and check out Bryan's music and his TikTok account. He's got music on Bandcamp and the other streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music. One of the Microtonal albums being In Your Hands, his most recent really Microtonal album, has a lot of really cool, wacky stuff on it. He has a new album out called Supernova, which is a Vocaloid masterpiece. So please listen to both of those. And have a great day, everyone.
All right, yeah, it was a lot of fun talking and chit chatting, you know.
Well, it was great talking to you. We'll definitely chat sometime soon again.
Sure, yeah. All right, yeah, thank you, and have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Adios.
All right, bye bye.
Bye-bye. The track you're hearing is Shadow Play from Bryan's new album, Supernova. If you want to help the podcast out, please leave us a review on iTunes and spread the word. We try to release new episodes every once in a while, sometimes on the 12th, sometimes not. Get yourself subscribed so you won't miss any episodes. Now and Zen is available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or you can find our RSS feed at nowandzen.libsyn.com. Thanks once again to Bryan for joining us, and thanks to everybody listening. We're here to spread the love of microtones, and you're part of the team. As always, I'll remind you that we have a Patreon account, and that our goal is 60 patrons. Your support is appreciated more than ever. If you have suggestions about how Now and Zen can help musicians or want to voice your opinion about who should be on the show next, Patreon is the best place to do that. A huge thanks to our Zen Harmonic patrons, as well as our Zen Harmonic gods, Niran Ratan, Mike Battaglia, Adam Fries, Matthew Sheeran, Vincenzo Sicarella, Hector McGuffin, Christopher Bailey, Leland O. Weigel, Amy Coleman, Joe Weigel, and Tina Harmon-Carteau. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and catch you next time on the next episode of Now in Zen. Here is Bryan Deister's song, The Window, from his Microtonal album, In Your Hands.